Good evening, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 118. As always, I shall start us off with a tune. Send for
You're still there? Is your internet shit the bed? Oh, we lost him. Oh well. I haven't got the musical talent to carry that intro on, and I can't share screen either, so I can't play it in his stead. Yeah, I think we're being sabotaged by Big Mohan himself this week. Just give him a minute; he should be back. Nice to see the regulars in the chat: Sunny Jim, Tricky Woo, Adam, John Best, Davey. Hello to everyone. Yeah, F's all round. I don't think he lost his internet. I think his house got drone striked. Oh, he's back. You back? You with us? You there?
I will be in a sec, mate. I'm sorry. I'm trying to fix something. Right. Sorry about that, guys. Something went wrong with with my stream, and I got kicked out. Anyway, apologies to Chris Gard for messing up his song. All right. Good evening, chat. How are you going? And how are you today, Atman?
Yeah, I'm good. You?
Yeah, not bad. Actually pouring down with rain here at the moment, which hopefully you can't hear in the background.
Oh, really? It's been quite nice here the last couple of days, actually. So I think this is the weather exchange between England and the rest of the Commonwealth.
Yeah, it could well be. It could well be. Adam in the chat says even Susan wants him to start with a different song for once. I believe Susan is no longer in charge of.
She can probably still pull many strings.
Indian chat. Oh, she could do. Yeah, that's probably true. Although I'm not keen on starting on a different song. We always have a different one when we finish. By the way, I've got a really good Royal Navy song to finish on today from Patriotic Archive, which is an excellent channel people should go and check out. Let me also mention that if you want to send us a super chat, you may do so via entering Bee, which I will put the link in the chat minutes. So did you have a first subject you wanted to bring up, Adam?
No, I've been quite busy, and as I was saying, it seems to have been a bit of a slow news week. The only real thing I've got is this this Grand National story where they've had all the protesters up there. It's I think they've arrested over 100 people over this. It is pretty insane. But yeah, and it's like cause they had a guy on, I think it was on with Farage. I don't know if because he has that show, doesn't he? Is it Pints with Farage or something like that? I don't know what segment this guy was on, but he had this guy on there, and they were talking, and it was kind of funny because it's like obviously you just had the sort of very sort of typical sort of everyday man arguments from Farage, where he's like, "But I'm going to have a nice day out, and you're going to ruin that." And of course the protesters like, "Why can't you go and have a picnic or go walk in the woods and see animals that aren't having their heads blown off?" And it was a pretty lame conversation. I tried to open it up in the office, and sort of all the women were like, "Oh no, not the poor horses." And it kind of made me think. I was sitting there, I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, like, how many statues of horses are there? Like even the very term statue implies a man on a horse, and it's like this animal, this
very common.
Yeah, and it's like this animal has kind of been.
You're roboting a bit, Ataman.
Oh, are you? Oh, am I? Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, a little bit.
Not sure.
You're all right now. It's just dropping in and out kind of thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I know. I think there was a bit of a lag there for a second as well. Is that all right now?
Yeah, I think so.
Right. But yeah, and it's like same with dogs, right? There's statues of dogs. There's statues of bears in some places, but very particular ones, like Wojciech and stuff like that. These animals have been essentially uplifted, immortalized in a way that they couldn't possibly outside of sport and warfare that are sort of very much human things. So yeah, I'm not really sure I buy this. I've always kind of found a lot of this sort of weird modernist animal welfare stuff a bit funny. Like, you go back and you see. I mean, I've got a video of my computer of a certain Austrian painter in World War One who had a Jack Russell that he trained to do tricks in the First World War, and and of course here in Britain as well, you had like. You can find countless videos of like colonial troops or whoever from whenever, some British guy off in some far off land, making a fuss of some animal. But that's sort of very different. Those people were sort of very aware that they were masters of their domain, and it was sort of a duty and responsibility to use and also care for animals. Where I find modern animal welfare is kind of. It's got this sort of liberal egalitarian stain to it that's kind of a bit cringe.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you look at it, Britain had very, very advanced and relatively early animal welfare laws. But I think there's a big difference between animal welfare stuff and animal rights stuff. I think that there are two different horses, if you see what I mean. Yeah. If you'll excuse the pun.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like, I mean, my mother was a show jumper, so I'm probably a bit biased in this regard. I grew up with horses and stuff like that. And it's like, like even to the point of like when they shoot them on the racetrack, horses are notoriously hard to rehabilitate when they've sustained particularly bad leg injuries. They have to be hung up in these giant harnesses. They hate it. It's traumatic for them. Yeah. And you often do them more harm than good.
I have to say, I'm not a big fan of the Grand National, for example. I think
well, this is what I was going to mention next, is because maybe there is an argument to be made that this particular type of horse racing is a bit too rough.
Yeah, I think if you're going to do jumps horse racing, there is no reason to make the jumps deliberately dangerous. I think that's a bit on the cruel side, to be honest with you, because the horses don't ask to do it,
No, but at the same time, they couldn't, even if you did ask them, they can't exactly give permission.
No, exactly.
And
true.
that's where
true.
that's kind of the distinction I'm trying to sort of draw a line through here. Where where you get like these sort of vegan types on one side and versus the more old school just animal lover on the other.
Yeah, I mean, look, as I say, I like horses. I like riding. I haven't done it as much as I'd like, but I have been riding. I would actually make the fences on the Grand National smaller, to be honest with you. I would, and easier to jump. I don't think that's too much. And I don't think that would spoil any particular tradition, because I mean, I don't think it's a tradition to kill horses, to be honest, in Britain, which is generally a horse-loving country. So yeah, I would certainly do that. But I mean, it's like I give money regularly to a Brumbies charity in Australia, which is like the Australian version of Mustangs in America, like wild horses.
Yeah.
And I also give money to a dogs charity, but they're both animal welfare groups rather than animal rights groups.
Yeah, it's like, I've donated money to charities. I kind of stopped for a couple of reasons. I actually I might have mentioned this last stream. I can't remember. I took a stray cat to the vet last week, so there is that. I try to do my bit. I didn't want to see the poor little guy suffering, because I do actually genuinely feel quite sorry for him.
I mean, look, I put water out for the birds in the summer here because it's really dry and there's not many water sources around where I live. I mean, that sort of thing. I think most people do. It's particularly a kind of Anglo-Celtic thing to like feed the birds in winter and all this kind of story. But yeah, I do think that many of the modern groups are. I don't get the whole animal rights thing entirely at all, to be honest with you.
I think some of it's like a tack on, though. Like I think a lot of that is just people that want to be political activists, and they just try to attach themselves to something that they can throw around for clout. And
yeah, I think the Greenies have definitely got involved in it for sure. And I'm no fan of the Greenies, as anyone who listens to me will know. I think they're watermelon greenies. They're green on the outside and commie red on the inside mostly. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I've shot antelopes for my soldiers. I don't actually like shooting animals, to be honest with you. I was never very keen on it, but I mean, I've shot antelope in Africa for my soldiers. I go fishing a lot, or at least I used to, and I used to eat some of the stuff I caught. So I mean, I'm certainly not somebody who's in any way, shape, or form vegan.
Yeah, I mean, I've been deer stalking, and I would like to do it again. Revels in the Discord, he's big into his fishing, and I know that he absolutely loves fish, and he's like he takes real care in being very, very gentle to them when he's catching them and pulling them out, and puts them back ultimately.
Well, I used to put most of the stuff I caught back. I would only keep what I was actually going to eat.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like when I went deer stalking, we had the venison afterwards, and
yeah, I mean, if you don't eat it, then I don't see any point in it. Like these people who go and shoot lions and elephants and rhino and stuff, I just have no room for them at all.
No,
because that's not for food.
Well, that's another interesting conversation, actually, the trophy hunting one, because it's like the argument for, which I'm not sure I agree with, for a couple of reasons that we can get into, is that they say that it raises an enormous amount of money for these game reserves, where a lot of those animals would otherwise just be killed for farmland or ignored, and it protects them from poachers. And of course, the locals do eat, when you down an elephant, the locals do eat all that meat. But of course, the flip side to that is that the money doesn't actually end up getting back to the care of the animals. Like, there are some examples of this, like white rhinos in South Africa, where the money from trophy hunting of white rhinos did actually allow white rhinos to come back. I think I don't know if they're now off the endangered species list, but they are making a comeback.
I used to know Nick Steele. He was one of the guys who did that original Operation Rhino in South Africa. I met him a few times. He was a really nice chap. I don't know if he's still around, actually. He's a fair bit older than me. But that was a very successful program. But I mean, there was certainly no possibility of hunting white rhinos at the time it was started, because there weren't enough of them left.
No. But they did start it a while afterwards.
It's got so ridiculous in Kenya, for example, with black rhino, that individual rhinos who were being followed around by their own team of game wardens, it was the only way to stop them being poached. And they were also sawing the horns off of them so that they wouldn't be poached, because the Chinese have got this ridiculous idea that it's an aphrodisiac, which it most certainly isn't, of course.
No. Yeah, it's worth more than gold per kilo. Ivory.
You just as well chew your fingernails if you think it's an aphrodisiac. It's basically the same stuff your fingernails are made out of.
Yeah, and it's like, but the thing is, because I've heard some sort of like libertarian types, and they've made the argument that you should be able to farm the ivory. I know there's some Englishman that lives down somewhere in Africa, and he has a big game reserve, and he always says that if they let him sell the ivory, he would just, because it grows back, right? He would just farm it off the living animals without having to kill them. But the problem with that is,
I'm not sure you can do that, to be honest.
Well, see, this is the thing. So the problem is, a European would do that. An African isn't going to do that, though.
No.
Right? And we're already seeing this, in Zimbabwe, right? This wasn't an issue under Rhodesia, but now under Zimbabwe. When you buy trophy hunting licenses, that money isn't really being spent in a particularly appropriate way, and those herds are actually diminishing very slowly, but they are.
I mean, look, in South Africa, there is there are private game farms all over the place. Like one of my mates' fathers ran one, and in those places, I absolutely don't have a problem if people want to go and hunt there. I mean, the meat does get eaten. If it's not, some of it will get taken by the actual hunters, and like you say, the rest of it will go to the local local Africans. And I got no problem with that. But that's a private thing. I'm not really keen on the idea that like actual national parks and so on should allow hunting, because that I don't think is really right, to be honest.
Sure. But it's still, I just still see it as an issue that I don't think. What I'm saying is, I don't think Africans can be trusted with their own wildlife. Is what I'm saying.
Oh no, absolutely they can't. I mean, look at you Cameroon, for example, in West Africa, which used to have a pretty big, diverse number of wild animals, has very few now because they've all been killed by African poachers.
Yeah,
and that's going on all over Africa, really.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think I trust the ANC too far with the game reserves in South Africa either, to be honest. So
no, I mean, like as you were saying, the white rhino projects have worked tremendously, but the people that man those projects were largely like Afrikaners or Anglos ultimately.
Yes, the people in charge of it were. I mean, if you go to Umfolozi Shishlui game reserves in Natal, KwaZulu Natal as it's called these days, the game guards are mostly Zulu dudes. Very smart, very military Zulu type dudes as well, and they're good. But the guys who ran the place were mostly white guys, as you say, quite correct. I mean, most of the game reserves in Africa, if you're talking about Kenya and Tanzania, Zimbabwe, South Africa, etc., all of those game reserves almost were started by old white big game hunters at the end of the 19th century and the early 20th century, who had just decided, they'd noticed how few animals were left and said, well, look, instead of shooting them, I'm going to start preserving them.
Yeah, I think Adam in chat's got the right idea. We can bring back the British Empire, but under the guise of animal welfare.
Yeah, I mean, look, like I say, I think animal welfare is very, very traditionally British. Like in Queen Victoria's era, Britain had the most advanced animal protection laws in the world, and in some respects, they have gone down today.
Yeah.
Like we didn't allow things like halal slaughter in the 19th century, whereas now we do.
Yeah.
And the same thing can be said of kosher slaughter as well.
Yeah. Yeah, Mitch, save the bees, not refugees.
Yeah,
I can get behind that.
I don't disagree with that at all. Davey, they weren't PETA at all. They weren't anything like PETA. These guys were old big game hunters, some of whom had shot hundreds of elephants and rhino and what have you in their careers, who just noticed that there were fewer and fewer of these animals, and also that there was less and less space for wild animals, because strange to say, African villages don't get on too well with elephants and rhinos and lions and so on, and decided that they needed to set aside land to protect these animals, and that's how nearly all of the game reserves in Africa started. In fact, I don't think any of them have ever been started by black people, by black African people. Not one, to the best of my knowledge.
Now, this is probably going to start an argument, but John Best above says, Duke, what was it like being a hunt sab, and do you support fox hunting?
No, I don't really support fox hunting. No, yes, I was a hunt sab at one stage, just after I left the British Army for about 6 months. It was a good way to meet cute little chickie babes. And I used to be called a fascist hunt sab because they knew I'd just come out of the army. So there you go. But I tell you one thing that the fox hunters often say is that the hunt sabs like do bad stuff to the horses and the dogs and what have you. I'm here to tell you that's not the case.
Yeah, I've seen
I'm
that.
here. I'm here to tell you. Well, I've never seen anyone doing it, and I went on.
I think hunt saboteurs have changed a bit over the years, but I do.
Oh, they might now. Look, I'm going back into the. I'm going back into the 1980s here, man. So a long time ago. But when I was doing it, we certainly didn't do anything to hurt dogs or horses, or I wouldn't have done it. Simple as that. I did pull a huntsman off his horse once, but he tried to hit me with his riding whip.
Yeah.
So he got what he deserved, but I didn't hurt his horse.
I would have given you a black eye.
You could have tried. I was pretty fit and all right in those days, but yeah, like I said, it's got nothing to do with PETA, which I agree with Davey 1602 is a ridiculous organisation, and PETA does more harm to animals than good, if you ask my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, PETA is very much like, to go back to what we were talking about at first. PETA is very much on the cutting edge of like what I was talking about, where it's like it's like you said, animal rights rather than animal welfare. It's like this weird sort of cancerous, like animal welfare seen as egalitarianism.
Well, I don't agree with human rights, so I certainly don't agree with animal rights.
No.
So it's like I do absolutely believe in animal welfare, but I don't believe in animal rights at all. Yeah. But then I don't believe in human rights either. Really, I think that's a load of nonsense.
Yeah, well, it's the same as like, I mean, Bowden talked, particularly in his talk on what's the guy's name who wrote Conan and the Barbarian?
Oh God, I know.
He was from.
Just did a stream on him, didn't he?
Robert E. Howard. Yeah, no, yeah. You just reminded me of the stream. Yeah.
Yes.
You know, and he points out that like in that sort of like really barbaric, but sort of quite foundational moral concept is that the strong look after the weak, right? It's like the strong see it as their duty and their responsibility. And you kind of see this in like, you know, early feudalism and stuff like that. And it's kind of also, you know, a great chain of being to its absolute extremes. It's also kind of like the relationship between humans and animals is how I think it should be. But, you know, I mean, as the Bible says, they're kind of there for us, but, you know, we also need to look after them. And,
yeah, I mean, look, my dog's asleep on his cushion on the sofa, which he uses more than I do. behind me at the moment. So
Yeah.
it's a
And
hard life.
I mean,
Hard
Adam
life
in
being a
chat said,
rookie.
Adam in chat said they're just using animal rights to attack what they perceive to be an upper class pursuit. You see that now, where you still get hunt saboteurs, even though there's no fox hunting.
Yeah, I
It's
don't
just
understand
it's just a trail hunt.
Yeah, why do they care about that?
Well, they claim that foxes are still being hunted, but they spend inordinate amounts of money on this. There's a guy in New Romney, not far from me, who literally gave up his job as a financer in London, moved down here, and uses his money to and he has all these drones, and they have like quad bikes and everything, and they go out and they go looking around for evidence of fox hunting, and it's like they haven't found any. I think one of their Instagram accounts, like the big piece of evidence was they found a fox's tail in a woodland, where obviously the fox had been like torn up, but that could have been by anything. So it's a bit.
Yeah. I mean, as I understand it, since they banned fox hunting, farmers are actually shooting more foxes than fox hunters used to catch. But I don't know if that's true.
Yeah.
But that's certainly what I've heard, is that more foxes are dying now because fox hunting is not actually all that an efficient way of killing foxes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, like my mother went fox hunting a bunch of times. We weren't. I make it sound like I came from some private estate. I grew up in a council house, but and this is something that like a lot of modern people don't seem to get, is that even if you just go back to like the 90s, if you lived in a council house in a village, and you actually got out there and got in with the community, you could end up on the back of a horse, someone else's horse, a borrowed horse.
For sure, yeah, for sure.
Riding some sort of outward pursuit, whatever. But she went fox hunting probably about half a dozen times, and I don't think in any of those hunts they ever even caught the fox. They're very good at getting away, and of course that's part of the sport of it.
I'm sure Adam is entirely correct in the chat when he says occasionally the dogs will stumble on an actual fox. Yeah, I'm sure they do. I mean, there's not much you can do about that. And if they do stumble on an actual fox and they actually manage to corner it, they'll kill it because that's what they're trained to do.
Well, yeah, they use these very distinct scents now to try and not get dogs to confuse them with actual wildlife. But dogs are dogs, and they will chase things. So
absolutely, yeah. My little dog will chase things, like birds and what have you. He doesn't catch them, but he will chase them.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of the hunts do try to pick areas that don't have a lot of foxes, but there are quite a lot of foxes around anyway, so that's almost an impossible task in of itself. So,
well, I mean, look, even when I lived in the UK, there were foxes in the middle of bloody London, so
yeah,
they go up the railway lines and stuff. So I'm sure there are foxes all over the place.
I mean, I have shot foxes with a gun because I had chickens, and we'll have some more soon at some point.
Yeah, no, look, I get that. I like I said, it's not something I do myself, but I don't criticize other people who do that stuff because, like I say, I've shot stuff in the past. I fish. I eat animals, so I'm not going to be a hypocrite.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I didn't get about these people in the office, and they were saying about, they just didn't like any sports with animals because the poor, and they were going on when I said to them that I've been deer stalking, they're like, oh, but the poor Bambi. It's like, you go to McDonald's on your lunch break, And
I don't think you were actually hunting a fawn, were you?
No.
They're generally pretty careful about not hunting. They don't even hunt like the female deer when they've got babies.
No, you're very when you're if you go up to one of these estates, they're very strict about what it is you can and can't shoot because these deer are worth a lot of money to them. They manage these herds and these estates. They have no
predators. They have no predators because there's no wolves in the UK. There's no bears in the UK. So if you didn't manage them, you just end up with like enormous, ridiculous numbers of them.
Yeah.
So again, I can see that. It's not a sport I would want to do because I don't like shooting animals. But I can perfectly understand why they do it. And like I know that people are really strict on this stuff. It's like, as I said, one of my mates' fathers ran a game farm in South Africa. And like you were not allowed to shoot female antelope when they had babies. You just weren't allowed to shoot them, even if they didn't seem to have a baby with them, because they used to leave them hiding somewhere sometimes.
Yeah.
So you could only shoot males at that time of year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which, of course, you could tell by the antlers and the horns and all the rest of it.
Yeah, and it's like the other thing as well with I mean, I'm not trying to make an excuse for hunting here. I've done it and I don't have a problem with it, but I'm not like particularly trying to defend it. But animals in the wild will die in pretty horrific ways, like all the time.
Yeah.
There was one particular story I remember a while ago where one of these national parks in America that is now in a democratic run state, they basically banned people from shooting bears in the countryside. They've done this as well, I think, in British Columbia in Canada. But essentially there was a guy who was attacked in this national park and he shot the bear, and he had to go to court over it and basically prove or try and prove that he had acted in self-defense. And the game wardens, I think, was what ended up kind of letting him getting him off. The park wardens, I should say.
Yeah.
They because they said, oh, that bear used to attack everyone because he was like riddled with arthritis. It's like, well, bloody well, let someone shoot the poor bastard then.
Yeah, he was an angry bear, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, look, I absolutely see that. I mean, like you hear about these. I watch channels about people who walk through American national parks and all this kind of stuff, and quite a lot of people get killed by bears in America because you don't actually stand a great deal of chance, especially against a grizzly bear, if it decides it wants to kill you. And some of these guys, they go walking and like, all right, I get some people don't want to carry a gun, and you got to carry a pretty reasonable rifle to be effective against a bear anyway. But some of them don't even take bear spray with them, this anti-bear stuff. But some of them don't even carry that, which I think is insane if you're going walking through an American national park.
Yeah, it's like so like Puffwagon said in chat, hunting any animal for fun is a sicko pastime. I mean, I think there's other reasons than that. Like, for example, we don't have cave lions or bears in the UK or wolves. I suppose people weren't hunting them for fun, though. They were deliberately trying to clear space. Lebensraum, you could say. And but similarly, like, I mean, this was the thing when I first went deer stalking quite a few years back. The one and only time, and of course I quite liked animals. And when I did it, I kind of had this feeling where I was like, I can kill an animal that I'll eat, but I won't go any further than that. I don't think, not ever. So even though I was making a defense of trophy hunting earlier on, it's not anything I'd ever do.
I'm exactly the same. I'm exactly the same. I've shot a fair number of antelopes in Southwest Africa to feed my soldiers because they wanted fresh meat because they were AFs. And I ate some myself. But it was not something I did because I liked doing it. I wouldn't dream of going on a hunting safari. It would just it would not be my idea of a fun time. I like game reserves, but the only shots I take are with cameras. But on the other hand, I know people like Red Hawk, who I like, who do go hunting.
Yeah.
So I'm certainly not going to turn around and say that all hunters are evil, because I don't think they are. I knew loads of people in South Africa who used to go hunting.
Yeah.
One of my best mates had a huge leopard pelt on his wall, which he shot when he was actually a game warden in what was then Rhodesia. And it was one of the biggest leopards that was ever killed in Rhodesia. Yeah. And the reason he shot it when he was a game warden was it was killing Africans' livestock. And so he had to shoot it.
Yeah.
Which was better than the Africans killing random leopards, rather than the one that was actually doing it.
And the other thing as well is that, like, people will say, I mean, one of the things you'll hear a lot is people will go, well, it's not sport because you're armed with a gun, blah, 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 or a bow and arrow, whatever it is. And it's like, maybe there's a fair comment to that. But at the same time, like, when you're hunting a deer, let's say, and you see one up a hill, if that thing gets a whiff of you, it will sprint up over that hill like it's nothing. It might take you a good 3 minutes of huffing and puffing to get up that poxy hill. You know,
And by that time, the
animals are
deer's
built
long
different.
gone.
Yeah, exactly. You know,
Yeah, they've got
they're
much better
built different.
senses.
Yeah.
They've got much better senses than we
Their
have.
stamina's incredible. A lot of them have just incredible strength and muscle density. You know, you know, that our strength is not compared to the natural world. It's not physical. It's cognitive.
Yeah, 100%. I look at, like I say, I don't disagree with that at all. My position these days on hunting is actually less anti-hunting than it would have been 25 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, let me be clear. I'm absolutely against hunting anything that's rare. If it's rare, like, no, sorry, shouldn't do it. And I'm totally against things like, I'm totally still against whaling, which the Japanese still do. I'm still totally against that. I think whales are quite intelligent animals. And we don't need to hunt them, to be honest. You know, Japan wouldn't stop being Japan if they stopped whaling.
Well, that's the other thing, right? Isn't it? I mean, I was picking on Africans earlier, but like, let's be honest, the Asians aren't much better. I mean, the Chinese will eat literally anything.
Absolutely anything, including poor bloody dogs, which, in my opinion, makes them barbarians.
Yeah.
But I mean, also, you know, the rhino stuff and also the ivory thing is basically based from China.
Yeah, absolutely.
If the Chinese weren't doing that, neither rhino nor elephant would be endangered.
Yeah, it's, you know, it is a funny one. I don't really get why, especially since they're supposed to be the high IQ ones, and yet they seem to just completely lack any sort of empathy for anything that isn't intrinsically like them.
Yeah.
I
mean, they have dog meat festivals in China, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Like, you know, which I couldn't go to such a thing because I'd end up killing somebody.
Yeah. I mean, I remember watching a documentary once. And it was like I think it was on the BBC, but they were on Japan, and even they said like, you know, we like they will like gut dolphins outside of or whatever it is outside of a fishery as like school kids walk past.
Yeah. I mean, Adam in the chat is saying tigers are also being made rare because of the bloody Chinese. Yes, true, absolutely.
Yeah,
true.
they hunt them quite prolifically in India as well, and places like that.
But they have game reserves in India, which are reasonably well policed, I believe. I mean, India's still got a few lions. Even not many people realise there are some lions in India.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like yeah, sorry.
Carry on. No, you carry on.
I was just going to say, because Natman Prime said a little bit further up, eating lamb is the worst. It's a baby sheep. Yeah, I'll be honest, I've always actually had a little bit of a problem with that. I love lamb, but there's always part of me that I don't eat it very often. There's a part in the back of my mind that's like, you should probably at least let the animal grow up and have a bit of a life first.
There's two things I don't eat. I don't eat veal. Because of that veal crate stuff where they keep them in the dark to keep the meat pale.
Yeah.
I've never eaten veal and I never will, and I will not eat pâté de foie gras, which is force-fed geese.
Yeah. Never.
Where they actually cram food down their throat to give them enlarged livers or whatever it is. I won't eat that either. They're the two foods I just will not eat under any circumstances.
Yeah,
I eat lamb for sure.
Well, it's like Ash and Duke just said, lamb chops with mint sauce. Yeah, that's bloody lovely. I love it, and I know I kind of don't want to, but it is delicious.
No, I look. It's not logical what humans do. Like I won't eat horse meat. I've eaten crocodile. I've eaten ostrich. I've eaten quite a few different sorts of venison. But I won't eat horse because I like horses and I don't want to eat horse, and I think it's un-British to eat horses, which it is.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the other thing as well, because you'll get a lot of people and they will, like regular people, and they have this sort of animal rights egalitarian thing about it, but they will intrinsically, they can't explain it, but they will be uncomfortable about you like killing an elephant, but they don't have the same issue about you killing a chicken or a cow. And it's like, it's like obvious, like they know, even if they can't admit it, they know sort of subconsciously that there are differences, that there's a sort of hierarchy in the animal kingdom as well, and that some animals are fine for food and others, like horses and dogs, you know, man's best friend, and
Yep.
you know, man's loyal steed are kind of off limits in certain ways, even if they can't explain it through their sort of logical egalitarian whatever.
Well, look, because I'm an Anglo-Celtic nationalist, which is why this is a British and Old Commonwealth channel. That's why I don't eat horse, because it's not British to eat horses. We don't. The French do, but you know, the French would eat their grandmothers if they could get a decent sauce to go with it.
Yeah, that's true.
But no, I look. So I don't eat horses because of that. Same reason I won't eat dogs. I mean, because dogs are man's best friend, literally, and like, I'm never happy unless I have at least one dog. And if my dog wasn't such a jealous little old git, I'd have 3. But you know, so
Yeah.
But yeah, we're not logical about this. But I think we used to be sensible, and now we're not. Like I watched a really old film a couple of weeks ago called Where No Vultures Fly, and it's about this British guy who comes home from World War II, goes out to Kenya, and they put him in charge of this enormous game reserve with like about 6 Africans under him, which is nowhere near enough, of course. And it's about his struggles with his family out there. You know, he's got a missus and a little boy, and of course the little boy absolutely adores it, and the missus doesn't much. It's not a bad film. But I mean, I think we had quite sensible attitudes back then, not so much now.
Yeah, it is a funny one.
I mean, I've eaten pheasant, I've eaten grouse, but I haven't shot either of them. I didn't move in the right circles to do that stuff. So you know.
Yeah, I might actually go pheasant shooting later in the season, but we'll see.
Have you done that before?
No, I haven't. I've done.
When I used to live in Berkshire, like there were pheasant shootery places all around the joint. You know.
Yeah. There's a few around here. I mean, I've been duck shooting when I was very young, but I'm not really that keen on ducks. So
I've been duck shooting, but didn't shoot any ducks.
Yeah.
I went in England actually, but I got taken duck shooting, and I just said, "Nah, I don't want to do it." So,
yeah.
But again, like I don't make any moral judgments on that stuff, so long as you eat it. If you eat it, great, I don't care.
Yeah,
I mean,
but it's like Adam said
why
above.
is it? Who has a better life, a duck that gets shot by a duck shooter, or some poor battery chicken? I mean, this is something else I try not to do. I try not to buy battery raised food. Like I don't buy battery eggs even. They're always free range.
Yeah. And I try to get everything from my local butchers and stuff like that. And
I totally agree with that too.
But Adam said above a little way. He said there was a scandal about horse meat a few years back. Yeah, I mean that was kind of a funny one. Well, yeah, there has, but the most recent one that was like 3-4 years ago. But that was a particularly funny one because in that instance it was an abattoir that was lying about what it was they were selling to supermarkets. So like big supermarkets like Sainsbury's and that were selling beef, but it was actually horse meat. Or it was labeled as something, but it had some percentage of horse meat in it. And it was kind of funny because people all seemed to think it was wrong, but them and the establishment had different ideas of why it was wrong. You know, people on the street were like, "Oh, that's awful. You know, you shouldn't eat horse," and that was just their position. And then sort of people, I remember listening to a radio show at the time, a call-in radio show, and someone called in and the radio presenter was like, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with eating horse." And the caller was like, "What? Well, what's the problem then?" And it was kind of like the establishment, obviously, and the reason why this was considered bad was because it didn't say horse meat on the packaging, right? It was you didn't know what it was you were eating. That was the issue.
Well, I mean, I think that's the issue. But I mean, I'd like to know if there was horse inside, because then I won't buy it.
Well, yeah, and obviously that's a reason for labeling being accurate. But the regular person on the street didn't seem to have the same issue. Their issue was more that they just thought you shouldn't eat horse, and that was sort of a bad way for a horse's life to end, like this noble beast almost. It was
I remember there was a big scandal, like you won't know about this, Alan, because it might even have been before you were born, but it was like in the late 80s, there was a huge scandal in the UK because like little girls' ponies, when the pony got too small for the little girl because she became a bigger girl, were getting sold and then shipped over to France, and of course the French were eating them.
Yeah.
France and Belgium, because they both do that. And that caused an enormous scandal. And actually, at least one company went bankrupt over it. I was happy to see it at the time.
Yeah. I don't even really see the big deal with horse though, because it has a really short shelf life as well, so it's not even a particularly useful meat to have around.
Never tasted it. Hopefully, never will. So I can't say a word about horses. But Michael K19 C fan says I ate kangaroo meat once. Well, I've eaten kangaroo meat quite a few times, and it's nice.
Is it gamey?
It's quite like venison, yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I remember there was actually a big scandal. I think I brought this up on a previous thing, but there was a big scandal actually. I'm not sure if you heard of this, even though it happened in Australia, but there was this bodybuilder, right, who was cast in a role because they said that he looked like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I don't think he did, but they said this, and they put him in this film. He was a big deal in California, and he had this bright future ahead of him. He was quite a young guy. His name was was he called like Callum von Moger or something? Anyway, he had an accident, some sort of accident, like some sort of fall and broke something, and then he had a bunch more accidents, and he tore a bicep or something like that. And he ended up dropping out of doing bodybuilding, and he moved back to Australia to his family. And he kind of went off the deep end and got into drugs, and then this video surfaced on his Instagram of him like butchering some kangaroo on the back of his pickup truck, and all the Americans just went absolutely insane over it.
Oh man, I don't know. Look, there's a lot of kangaroos in Australia. That's the only thing I will say. And again, they don't have. Apart from dingoes, they don't have many natural predators. And of course, the Australians poison dingoes at an enormous rate, sadly. You basically can't. I've watched two people who've done trans-Australian walks. I think one was going south to north and one was going east to west. And both of them took a dog with them, and both dogs died from dingo bite.
Oh,
that's
awful.
Yeah, I'd like it to the extent that if I ever did such a thing, I just wouldn't take a dog with me because I know that will happen for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, they'll even drop dingo baits from helicopters and shit.
Oh, well, so what's are there just too many of them out there, or?
I look at everything that farmers think is a threat. They go too far about, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's like we were talking about earlier with wolves and bears and stuff. A farmer who loses one lamb or something will say, okay, let's wipe out every local predator. That's just probably a natural business reaction, I guess. But it's
they did the same with the birds of prey here as well. And they're trying to reintroduce the birds of prey now, and a lot of farmers are quite kicking off about it, which I do kind of understand, but still.
How many people? Look, if roof your bloody chicken run, you know.
Yeah, they can pick up lambs, though, the bigger ones.
Yeah, but only if they're newborn or really sick. I actually fell out of a woman in Australia once who was a chicken farmer. She was a free-range chicken farm.
Yeah,
and she used to shoot wedge-tailed eagles, which are like the big eagle in Australia. They're a bit like a golden eagle in the UK, but a little bit more common, but only a little bit because farmers shoot them and poison them all the bloody time. Although it's illegal, and it's illegal to do so because they're not common enough to do that anymore. So yeah, again, I split up with this woman over this because I just said, yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
because my view was she had like, I don't know, 11,000 chickens or something, and like if she lost 2 of them, was that really the end of her business? I don't think so.
I suppose she was just worried about it happening more and more, I suppose. But
well, okay, so scare them, or there are things you can do other than shooting them.
Yeah.
Or you can just say, look, I'm here. They were here thousands of years before I was, so I'm going to lose a few chickens. Big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a funny one.
Good point from Jobu here. The farmer question needs to be discussed. The demand on an uninterrupted flow of slave wage migrant labour, or they go mental. And this is true in Australia, where Australian farmers depend hugely on black backpackers. And it's also true in the UK, I believe, Outman, as well.
Yeah, well, see, this is actually a problem I kind of have with the language of it as well. Like, I've worked on farms, right? I've worked on 3 farms, but I would only actually call 2 of them farms, because one of them was I think at the time it was like the 3rd biggest farm in the UK, and it was a fruit picking farm, and that wasn't a farm. That was a corporate and factory environment, right? Stuck together. The guy who owned the place, he'd never done an ounce of farming in his life. He bought the place.
Just employed a manager, I take it.
Yeah. And never actually went out in the fields. Didn't really know how anything worked. And that place had an entire sort of systemic infrastructure around bringing in foreign workers, and they actually used to fall out with agencies who, because they actually used to sometimes struggle to get the foreign labor, and the management would actually fall out with agencies that brought in British labor instead.
I kind of I invited Magnus Furious on this stream, but it's very early where he is in Western Australia, because he's a farming dude whose dad owns a farm, but I think it's mainly crops. But so he might not know so much about the wildlife, the livestock side of things, but he probably would. But it's a pity he's not here to talk about this, because I agree with what Jobu said there totally, and what you were saying. Farmers they want this slave labor stuff. I actually did that once in the UK when I was in West Sussex. I went picking potatoes, and at the end of the week, I literally could hardly stand straight.
Yeah.
And you had to fill up this enormous, great big wooden crate, which was about 4 foot by 4 foot by 4 foot. Yeah. About 4
Did you
foot
use
square.
those? Did you use those blue, those metal containers with the blue sort of sleeve on the inside, where you throw the potatoes in the top? You wear it as a sort of front pack.
No.
And you throw the potatoes in the top.
No, mate.
And then
this was years and years ago. This is going back to the 1980s. And this was like I say, about 4 foot square wooden crate. And you filled up one of those and you earned £5 back then.
Yeah.
£5. And you can imagine how many potatoes you put into a 4 foot square crate. That's a lot. And like I said, I did that for 5 days. And I only did it for 5 days. So I was going out with a chick the weekend, and I wanted some money. So it didn't do me much good, because by the end of the week, I could hardly stand straight.
Yeah, it is tough. It takes quite a while to get used to it.
Oh, look, I'm sure if you did it all the time, you would get used to it for sure.
Yeah.
But the pay was appalling. I worked pretty hard, and I was young and fit back then. And I reckon, did I do 2 a day? Maybe. So 5 days, I earned 10 quid a day, basically.
Yeah.
Which was 10 quid back then was worth a lot more than 10 quid now, of course. 10 quid these days won't buy you 2 pints of beer, but
Yeah. See, nowadays here, they actually pay farm work quite a bit better, but they earn a lot of that back through lodgings, where they sort of rent out caravans on the farm on fields that have a bit less utility, or generally have poor yield, and so they're effectively still paying low wages, but it's just kind of masked by these extra fees that they take out of them. And that's the thing, they don't actually want locals. This is the thing. This farmer I worked, the last one, the biggest one, You know, they're to even now they're still by far the biggest employer in the area. You'll never see an ad in the paper for a job there, not ever, even though they have
So
quite a high turnover of staff.
are they mostly like Eastern European workers and what have
Yeah,
you?
they all are.
Yeah,
They're all Eastern European in there, and they have all the agency firms as well who get workers for them are also Eastern European agency firms. You know, and that's just the way they work. And it's kind of it's just generally quite a silly practice the way they do it. And people say that like people won't do the work. Admittedly it's never you know, they probably wouldn't do the work because technically the farms are, once you take in the accommodation and everything else, the farms are paying less than minimum wage essentially.
yeah, yes, yeah, and that's wrong. You know, I mean, I, yeah, I don't get this. Britain's going for this like low wage economy, which is, and it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you're going for a low wage economy, you've got to keep importing immigrants, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, it also kind of seems a bit silly because the argument that like economists will do is that well, you need that stuff to be cheap because blah blah blah, and it's like, right, but you know, I mean, admittedly, these people coming in to work on farms aren't exactly pushing up the house prices. They're not the immigrants doing that, but it's such a small amount in your basket anyway. You know, for fruit's gone up in price, but it's still sort of you know, as a proportion, one of the cheaper things you're going to buy in a week. So you know, and it's so you're taking away a huge sort of potential job market, and you can get people to do this because, as I said, you know, there were instances where some agencies which struggled to get like Romanians in would actually just employ some people from the local job center, and they were fine.
Yeah.
And people say like, oh, you know, no one wants to do that job because it's so backbreaking. I worked in newspaper wholesale in between working on the farms, and that job is muckier, wetter, harder, tougher. It does pay like a fraction more, but not a lot more. and that job is entirely English blokes, entirely. So
yeah, no, British people used to do really hard work, and they will do hard work. I mean, all right, the harder it is, they're going to want to get a bit better paid for it, but that's fair enough. This idea of like employing people, like in Australia, as Jobu has been talking about, the farmers totally depend on backpackers for the most part to do their picking and all this kind of stuff, and pay them next to nothing because the backpackers are just trying to extend their holiday a bit, you know. But you can't do that in England because we don't have that many backpackers, you know.
Yeah. So Voucher in chat said locals would be more likely to take farm jobs if they were working alongside other English people rather than Romanians. Well, this is the thing. There was a
true.
Absolutely. There was an old lady that still worked at the farm after all those years on one of them. And she remembered the day before Tony Blair. She remembered like the mid 90s, and she said that, like, you know, sort of when it came up to like 1999, she said they all just got told that the place was being restructured, and they all had to reapply for their jobs. They all went on to 0 hours contracts, and then they all had to reapply for their jobs, and then basically none of them were given their jobs back.
And as Jobu said in the chat a bit further up, then people wonder why people leave small country towns in Australia, and I'm sure the same is true of villages in England, when they can't get a local job.
Yeah.
Whereas in the past, you could have got a job as a farm labourer and maybe worked your way up to farm manager and this kind of stuff. Or maybe even eventually you've got your own farm, but you can't do that anymore because they're just employing all these foreigners.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like where was I going with that? And it's like, yeah, so they restructured the farms, and they specifically, and then the ones that were left, they just didn't want to be like the only English guy sitting in the canteen on a particular shift, you know, just surrounded by Eastern Europeans. And my manager, when I was there, she said to me, oh, you know, the Romanians have to go with the Romanians, and the Bulgarians with the Bulgarians, and the Lithuanians with the Lithuanians, because they all argue and fight otherwise, like cat and dog. But she said, oh, the good thing about you English is you'll go anywhere. So you kind of end up being like put into this situation where you're made to be a peacekeeper between all these different arguing ethnic groups.
Wouldn't it be better just to employ British people and they'll all get on reasonably okay? You know,
I mean, it's so much effort on a lot of these giant modern farms gets put into just crisis management rather than actually, farming and getting product to customers.
Yeah, I don't know. Have you also noticed? I mean, I know you just touched on this a bit, saying that like fruit has gone up a bit, but not enormously. But I'm noticing here that like food prices, especially for meat, but also a lot of other stuff, is like just going through the roof these days.
Yeah, it is. Well, I mean, kind of everything is, but it is funny, isn't it? How like a lot of these things. I think AA had a video on this, but a lot of these things are, we're told that this stuff is that the immigration makes this stuff cheaper and makes our cost of living cheaper generally. But we have more immigration than ever here, and all that just seems to be falling through the floor. And then when you bring that up, people just say, "Oh, well, actually, that's because of these other problems." And it's like, okay, well, so does immigration counter this stuff or not? Obviously not.
I mean, as Valtra said in the chat here, if you're going to employ these foreign workers, whether they be backpackers in Australia, all right, the backpackers in Australia get paid so little that they're probably spending that in Australia, to be fair, but probably not in the local area because they'll have moved on. Whereas in England, where you're employing these Eastern European workers, that money, as Valtra says in the chat, that's being sent back to Bulgaria or wherever. It's not being spent in England.
Yeah, they're almost always, they've got like a family back home that they're sending money to, or they're trying to save up for a house because, houses over there are quite a bit cheaper. So, they live really frugally. They don't even really spend much in the local economy at all, except the bare basics. And then they're sort of they're sending it all back. So there's sort of a wealth transfer going on as well out of these things.
Yeah, totally. But I mean, it's this whole idea that UK has to be this cheapskate, low wage economy is ridiculous for an advanced Western economy. It's not what it should be about. But I mean, equally, you don't find, for example, all the binmen in UK being foreigners.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the funny thing is they say it's about jobs people aren't willing to do, but I can still find loads of jobs on the daily that are grimy, low paid, and not all that great that are full of English people all the time.
Yeah.
So clearly people will do these jobs.
I mean, with binmen, sewer workers, all that kind of stuff. And yet, strange to say, you don't see many women, meaning that there are not many women binmen or sewer workers. Strange that, isn't it? Because they're not in an air-conditioned office. It's just not sensible. It really isn't. And then look at Japan. Now, Japan is in a similar situation to the UK. It's an overcrowded offshore island with an aging population, but Japan is still 98% Japanese.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, like, I know the Japanese government's already made some moves to maybe change that in the future. But if, like, all they need to do, I know it means going through some economic decline, but, like, I mean, the demographics is a whole other discussion. Like, they were making this big hoo-ha on the news this week because they said that, like, studies have now shown that Africa will also have a declining birth rate by, like, 2100. Now there's that guy here on YouTube who also I think writes a Substack. What's his? Is it Zahan, something like that?
Don't know. Sorry.
Yeah, and there's I'll have to look him up at some point. And he does a lot of demographic work, and one of the quite interesting things that he sort of points to is that when you look at birth rates, they often don't take into account the average age of the population particularly very accurately. They just take like all adults essentially, or it's not quite all adults, but it's pretty close to all adults. Yeah, Peter Zahan, yeah, that's it. I think that's the one anyway. And it's kind of like the problem with that is that Africa has a very young population. So you can point to I think like Sudan has a fertility rate of like 8, right? And Germany has like 1.4 birth rate, I should say. And it's like, but if you consider the fact that if you go to Bavaria, you'll struggle to find someone under the age of 50. If you're like driving around just looking at people, going about their business, there's so many old people in Germany, whereas as Africa is the complete opposite. So when you look at it like that, the massive divergence in birth rates is nowhere near as strong as people make out. So it's not quite as sort of cut and dry as people make out. And I think part of this is also like the fetishization of these groups by our own elite, because they never admit it, obviously, but they do see like, the great replacement as like a deliberate thing, right? That they see it as exchanging this sort of low energy old European groups with this sort of new virulent high energy groups from the outside, and that's sort of them projecting their wishes onto them with a lot of these stats. And it's just it doesn't end up looking quite that way in reality.
Isn't it true that like immigrant groups into other nations, including the UK, for example, like after they've been there a couple of generations, their birth rates also slow down?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like even when they come here, the birth rates of those groups decline massively. To sort of, they're still a little bit higher than the native population, but not by a great deal.
But I mean, you've got to look at like in traditional third world societies, whether they be in Africa or Asia. Part of the reason for the high birth rate is that when parents get old, they get looked after by their kids.
Yeah.
So the more kids you have, the better you're going to get looked after, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
as in here in the West, it's kind of
simple as that.
Yeah, and as here in the West, it's kind of like people don't like that film. Is it called Gran Torino with Clint Eastwood? Some people say it's like anti-white, and it is to an extent. But when they show the scene where like Clint Eastwood's going to get thrown in the old people's home by his own kids, that's not inaccurate. That is actually what a lot of people do. My great grandmother, she her daughters, not my nan, but her sisters, they essentially moved their mother out into an old people's home when she really didn't need it, so that they could sell her flat specifically. And they moved her from the house that she had before into the flat, which was a little bit big for her, admittedly, but she only needed a little bit of extra help, and they moved her into this dingy little flat so they could sell the house.
Lovely. Jesus, I couldn't have done that. And I had my issues with my dad, but I couldn't have done that. My dad used to say to me when I was like in my 20s, never let me get put in an old people's home. And I never did that.
No,
I did make sure. My younger brother wouldn't have done it either, but like neither of us would have let my dad go into an old people's home. He used to tell us when we were like young men, please never do that. Not even if I go gaga. And I understand that perfectly. I don't understand children who do that to their parents. I really don't. And particularly, of course, we now know that during the great China virus stuff, allegedly, Susan, the people were basically being put down in old people's homes. They were giving them drugs that would shut them off, would kill them.
Oh God!
And yeah, seriously, they were giving them drugs that would deliberately kill them.
Oh.
And if you don't believe me, you can go and look at. Hang on, I'm gonna go and check this guy's name. He's a doctor, although that's a scientific doctor. He was actually originally a nurse, but he's a doctor, and you can go and check this for yourself. Just so you don't think I'm making like nonsense claims, because I'm not. He looked at this. And he was originally a big shill for the MNRA, so-called, and then eventually came to like the Musk bullshit and all the rest of it. It's all just lies, which it was. Hang on, I'm going to find this dude's name so people can go and look him up if they want to.
Ashton Brown. Harry Brown is Ashton Duke. Harry Brown was better than Gran Torino. Yeah, that's true. Harry Brown is a better film.
Oh yeah, I like Harry Brown. That's the Michael Caine one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't that the Michael Caine movie? Where he's the ex-Royal Marine. Yeah, that's an excellent movie. I like Harry Brown. That's a good film.
I don't know if he's an ex-Royal Marine. Yeah, he must be. Like I think so.
Yeah, he is. He's Royal. I like that film. Yeah, he's next.
Oh,
but yeah,
I think having problems with your internet again.
I liked it a lot. Hang on, am I? Seems to be all right.
Is there a delay? It seems.
Is there a delay?
Yeah, I think there is.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Well, I don't know what I can do about that, guys.
No, we'll just we'll keep going.
All right, we carry on for a minute, Adam, because I'm just going to find this dude's name because it's annoying me that I can't find it at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here we go.
Dr.
John Campbell. Dr. John Campbell. Go and look up Dr. John Campbell's channel on YouTube. And you'll find what I said about people being basically put down in UK old people's homes.
Is this the one you put in the
they were giving them 2 drugs
sometimes?
Yes, I put him up there quite a lot because, like I said, he started off as a complete shill for the vaccines and masks and lockdowns and all the rest of it, and then he gradually worked his way around to the fact that this was all crap. Really?
Good grief! He's got 2.7 million subs.
Yeah. And like I said, he started off as a total shill for the lockdowns, the MNRA so-called vaccines, which they're not, and the masking and all the rest of it. And now he's completely changed his opinion because he's actually looked at what's going on.
Yeah, he does a lot of videos.
He's excellent. Lady Shalott, for example, who got very heavily involved in the anti-vaxxer stuff and anti-lockdown stuff. She really likes him as well. But he's being honest. And he said he's got death threats from drug companies and so on, or people associated with drug companies, shall we say? So yeah, I don't know. But one thing I did want to talk about, Adam, was did you see the interview with Elon Musk by the Bias Brainwashing Corporation?
Yes, I did. I haven't seen the whole thing, but I've seen quite a bit of it.
Yeah, I watched all of it. It was classic. The one of the best bits was when he said, Vulture says, "Do I like BBC? Bias Brainwashing Corporation?"
No, that's not what he means.
I know that's not what he means, but I'm not going to give him the satisfaction, to be honest. But yeah, no, I don't like the British Broadcasting Corporation, or as I prefer to call it, the Bias Brainwashing Corporation. I don't like them at all. But yeah, but this dude was like, you were saying, "Oh, I've seen more hate speech on Twitter since you took it over." So Musk asked him, "All right, give me one example," and he couldn't. And so he
just immediately was like, "Oh, moving on. Let's go. Let's talk about something else."
He said something slightly sexist, if I remember correctly, is what he said. So this guy thinks something slightly sexist is hate speech.
Yeah.
which is ridiculous to start with. But then, of course, he turned around and said, "Oh, but I haven't used this for ages now, like weeks now." And then, of course, everyone's put up all the tweets that he made, like only a day or two before he did the interview. So he was just lying, basically. It was so funny. But yeah, no, Elon Musk had him for breakfast, which I thought was excellent.
Yeah, and he seemed quite affronted that Musk shared it to his Twitter Spaces.
Yeah, well, why wouldn't he?
I mean, I don't know what exactly he expected. That guy was a moron. Like that's I mean that didn't actually seem untoward for the BBC, but he didn't go into that particularly prepared at all. I don't know exactly what he thought, what he was expecting out of that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think Musk is our mate by any means. I don't like his transhumanism stuff, for example. But he was too intelligent for that, dude.
Well, yeah, I mean, like Jobby says in chat, he didn't exactly say anything remarkable, and that's true. He didn't seem to have to. He knew, all he did was make sure that the BBC couldn't selectively edit it because he streamed it himself. And then he just sort of tried to hold the guy to his questions, and that was basically all he needed for the guy to fall apart. It was not fall apart, but to definitely get rattled. So it was quite bizarre, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't think that BBC reporter's career is going to progress particularly well in the future. But what could he do? I mean, he was just had banged to rights, basically, wasn't he?
Yeah, I don't know. Is that the caliber of people at the BBC now? I mean, yes. I assume there's some better people higher up, but that was kind of embarrassing.
I don't think there are, to be honest with you. I mean, if you look at the BBC today, like it's determined to convince everyone that like 19th century Britain was full of black people and other lies. Franz in the chat says Bill Ottman of Minds arguing for allowing hate speech on Joe Rogan was more impressive. I haven't seen that, and I've actually got a fairly big Minds account of about 4,000 subscribers, supposedly. Although how true that is, I wonder. But yeah. But yeah, I'll have to look that up, friends, after this show. But yeah, I don't know. I know the Lotus Eaters, for example, Carl Benjamin, aka what did he used to call himself? Sargon. Sargon's channel made a big fuss about the interview with Musk.
Yeah.
But my problem is these days I don't think these sort of debates do much because I don't think there is this kind of free debate of ideas. I just think it's a nonsense. There isn't anything that we come up with on the right is just basically ignored.
Yeah, it's about the control of space rather than what's actually said within that space.
Yeah.
Lumberg said, I wouldn't make that assumption. I assume he's referring to me saying that BBC. I shouldn't make that assumption. The BBC probably has some at least reasonable debaters further up the chain, especially some of the older guys still around. I remember when what exactly was it they were commenting on? It was some subject came up and they had the former presenter of Question Time alongside 3 other BBC presenters. They were talking about the license fee. That was it. They were talking about the BBC TV license. And he actually, even though he's obviously biased because he works for the BBC, he still put in a pretty good devil's advocate against them. And those people just had to keep falling and dropping back on, sort of pretty cringe, fallacious arguments. So, there are still people in the BBC that can, put up a good fight, I suppose. But
did he believe what he was saying, though, Alan? That's the question.
I think to some extent he did. He did seem to be arguing more broadly that the BBC should. I think, like quite a few of the older people at the BBC, he probably sees the BBC's declined, even from his sort of perspective. Obviously, a lot of us probably thought the BBC was never good, but from his perspective, he's seen a decline, and I think he thinks that there's this sort of liberal argument for how you can bring it back, which is to make it more accountable to its viewers.
I think it's undoubtedly true that the BBC was far, far better in, say, the 1980s than it is now.
Yeah.
Because now it's just totally biased against Anglo-Celtic people, in all honesty. That's all it is. It's just anti-white, which in Britain's case is mostly Anglo-Celtic people. And the BBC is just that now, which in the 1980s it wasn't. It had a little bit of a left-wing bias back then, probably a bit more than a little bit of a left-wing bias, but it wasn't anti-white people.
Yeah, but it was still revolutionary at its heart. Like, they'd put out the occasional good bit of TV. Some people can name some, but for example, like they had characters like Alf Garnett in was it Till Death Do Us Part?
Yeah, awful, written by a Jewish guy.
Yeah. I mean, the Alf Garnett character was literally played by a Jewish guy as well.
Played by a Jewish guy, written by a Jewish guy. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not a total believer in the JQ, by the way, but yeah.
And he was like a caricature of sort of like regular English people that you were supposed to find laughable and treat with mockery and derision, and it's like when they were having their feud with Mary Whitehouse, when they kind of realized that they couldn't just get her on the show and laugh at her and in her face, they instead made Alf Garnett a Mary Whitehouse fan and then mocked her by proxy through that,
which no working class English dude of the Alf Garnett type would have been at all. Because they were all buying The Sun with page 3 in it and all the rest of it. They weren't. They were not Mary Whitehouse fans. Trust me, I know. My dad was one.
Well, I mean, as Adam says, Mary Whitehouse did nothing wrong. Whitehouse was right. Yes.
I wasn't a fan. I'm old enough. I remember, and I wasn't a fan, to be honest.
Sure, but you can literally look at the evidence and the data. A lot of the things she warned about did come to pass.
Oh yeah, for sure. Look, we tipped over the edge of that stuff a long time ago, and the slippery slope is definitely real. But I never thought Alf Garnett was very funny. My dad didn't like Alf Garnett because my dad could see it was a piss take of like people like him, basically. So the people who liked it were middle class for the most part, who wanted to look down upon the horrible English working class, the ones they call gammon these days.
Yeah.
For sure. And of course, the Americans copied Alf Garnett and did a show which was actually much milder than the Alf Garnett show. I can't even remember what it was called now. I think I watched one episode once. I didn't watch Alf Garnett that much either because I didn't like it. Like back then, I used to like Dad's Army, which was great. I thought that was a great show, which was not taking the piss out of these old dudes. Actually, it was laughing with them, if you know what I mean. That was a good show.
Yeah. I mean, usually, like a lot of people will point out, like how much comedians were used to sort of tear down.
Oh yeah. Yes.
I have a bit more of a defense for, let's say, Monty Python than some, although I can still see how some of that was subversive.
I used to like Monty Python was clever, but it was quite subversive. I mean, they were all these middle class Oxford, Cambridge types. Love Thy Neighbor was very subversive, as Ashen Duke says. It had this thicko English dude who was fat and not a nice dude, and of course the tall black dude, and his wife was prettier than the white dude, and fuck off. That was a horrible show.
Yeah. But some of these shows go back quite a way. So I think the BBC has always had this in them. And I think the BBC has been
Oh
anti-white
yeah.
a lot longer than a lot of people probably realise.
I just think they couldn't make it obvious in the 1980s like they do now. If they'd have tried to make it obvious in the 1980s, they would have got shot down by the public, whereas now they don't.
Yeah.
Because, we've had 2 generations of school kids go through state education, which is basically designed to say British people are bad, really. Like real Anglo-Celtic white British people, I mean.
Yeah, I might have to go back through Monty Python and just see if my hypothesis actually holds up. John Best said Blackadder was an abomination. Yeah, I always wanted to like that, but I actually quite like Rowan Atkinson. But fucking hell, that show is subversive in places.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I thought it was funny sometimes, but yeah, it is absolutely subversive. Totally, almost all these comedians were.
Yeah.
The one who wasn't was the bloke who used to do the Nick jokes. He was pretty good. He was the first dude to go down to the Falkland Islands after the Brits had recaptured it to like entertain the troops, and he did all these Nick jokes, which was the cops. He did Nick, which was the flashing blue light on the cop car. Something Davison, I think his name was. He was cool. He was funny.
Yeah. Patriotic Archive says Steptoe. Yeah, Steptoe and Son. That's that one wasn't too bad.
I didn't particularly mind that one.
What about the 2 Ronnies? Were they particularly subversive? I don't.
Nah, not really. They were all right. I didn't mind the 2 Ronnies. I didn't mind Porridge. That was all right.
Yeah.
Which was one of the 2 Ronnies. I can't remember which one now. 40 Towers was good. Yeah, I used to like 40 Towers. 40 Towers was bloody funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, but they wouldn't make 40 Towers today,
No.
They just wouldn't. And they wouldn't make Dad's Army today. And if they did, there'd be like 3 black blokes in it.
Yeah.
Even though my father never saw a black man until after he came home from Egypt, where he'd been guarding Suez Canal Zone for a couple of years in the 1950s. My father never saw a black guy until he saw black guys in Egypt, obviously, but he didn't see any in England until he came up.
Yeah.
So yeah, but Blackadder was funny in places, but it was absolutely subversive. Adam, Norman Wisdom is someone who, had I been alive at the time Norman Wisdom was around, I would have cut his throat. He's one guy who I detest, and not because he was in any way, shape, or form woke, just because I detest him. Anything with Norman Wisdom and I won't watch. The only thing I can put him in common with is who's that dude who gets in everything nowadays? So-called comic in the UK. And
there's
plays
so
a
many
character.
of them.
But he plays a character all the time, though. I can't remember
what's he been in?
Oh, fuck me, I can't even remember, man. Because I don't watch these things. I just hate this bloke so much.
Is he young, old?
Middle-aged now.
Middle-aged now.
Yeah.
Are you implying he wasn't middle-aged at some point?
Yeah, at one stage he was a bit younger than that, but now he's got this character he always plays, and I can't remember what his name is, but I detest him. And almost, I detest Norman Wisdom even more, but that's like just because I really detest Norman Wisdom.
I think my hatred for comedians started with Russell Howard.
I don't even know who that is, mate.
Alan
Partridge, Patriotic Archive.
Oh, right.
Alan Partridge, I hate that character and that comedian. Anything he's in, I won't watch. But I don't hate him quite so much as Norman Wisdom, who's even worse.
But yeah, Russell Howard. Funny enough, I put a clip of Russell Howard in one of my old YouTube videos. Talking about how, because he did a sketch, and I didn't actually know that Morgoth had commented on this sketch before I included Russell Howard in the video. I was just aware of this Russell Howard sketch and how I hated him for it. but he had his own BBC Three show called something like Russell Howard in the News or something like that, and it's just a stand-up show basically. And he did this whole bit where he got like clips of these EDL guys talking about rape gangs, and he started the whole Muslimic ray guns meme from this sketch, and he sort of like mocked these people and derised them, and it started off this whole thing where they had like a DJ make a whole song about it, and it's really disgusting. So he came to my hometown once, and sadly I didn't hear about it until like the day after he'd left, which is probably good. It's probably a good thing I didn't know he'd come to town, because I really, really dislike that guy. Hey, Toby.
I have no idea who Toby Nix is, but good day, mate. Ashton Duke says Steve Coogan, who is the guy that plays this Alan Partridge character, got free tickets to his latest stand-up show. He spent half the show taking the piss out of racist Brits. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all. That's exactly how he strikes me. Exactly how he strikes me. Like the sort of guy you wouldn't want to turn your back on if he had a dagger.
Well, the feeling's mutual, so.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, I detest him. I don't think he's funny either. That's the other thing I don't like about him. I don't think he's the least bit funny. I did try and sit through a few of his, like he's been in movies and all sorts of things, and he basically ruins, for me, anything he's in.
Yeah. Patriotic Archive, Gervais. Yeah, what's the other one? The guy who does 8 out of 10 Cats. That's Alan Carr. Am I thinking of the right one? Yeah. He did a recent new stand-up routine, and all these people at work were telling me like, oh, he's really out there and outspoken like you need to watch it. And I went through the whole thing where I was there on an evening shift, and they put it on for me to watch, and it was awful. I hated it. I hated every minute of it. He's Jimmy Carr, sorry. And he sits there and goes, he sort of starts off and goes, and he's like, oh, anyone that says all lives matter instead of Black Lives Matter, stick your hand up and then slap yourself across the face or something cringe like that. And then he bangs on about anti-vaxxers, and I just was like, oh, what is this shit? How is this outspoken? Like, this is
Did you see, by the way, Alan, that Arnie Babes has recently been trying to walk back the shit that he came out with during the China virus?
No.
Oh yeah, Arnie Babes came out doing adverts for the American government, mask up and lock yourself away, under house arrest, and all this stuff for a not all that desperately dangerous disease. And he's trying to walk it back now. He's trying to say, I saw a video about it today, and it's just so funny. All these guys who totally went along with this government narrative and World Health Organization narrative and globalist narrative are now trying to walk this shit back. It's so fucking amusing.
Yeah, we're probably going to see even more of that over the next year or two.
I don't know. The trouble is, apparently, in America, the first vaccine damage payout has been made, and it was several $1 million. I want to see that happen hundreds and hundreds of times all around the world, because that's about the only thing that might actually stop it carrying on.
Yeah, someone said, where was it? Four-time world's strongest man, Brian Shaw, told him to fuck off. Yeah, I saw that Brian Shaw in his he's got one of these large home gyms, and I saw that he did a thing where he took down the portrait or the painting or picture of him or whatever it was, the print of it, and put it away. So it's like it is kind of funny. He did, I do remember him saying that, fuck your freedom. And I think he came out recently, didn't he? And did a whole thing where he was like, did like an anti-fascism YouTube video or something, and he just got.
That's so unusual, hey? Because like everything doesn't go back to World War II.
Yeah, and he's like, "Don't be a loser like my dad," and it's like, yeah, I was kind of sitting there like, "Oh, this got some child abuse energy going on there," but and it's like the comments. The people should go and seek that video out just to look through the comments. The comments are amazing.
And do you know what Toby Nix is talking about here? He says, "Duke, do you know my mate Phil? He left me back in 2006."
No idea.
Because I have no, I don't know who Toby Nix is even. Never heard of him, mate. So like, and I have no idea who Phil is either. So there we go.
Lumberg is saying Jimmy had some of the best gags written though. He did. Like he has had he some of his stand-ups are genuinely very funny. You know, I've never actually noticed this level of subversion like in his latest one. You know, he has had some absolute corkers. You know, you can go and watch some of his stand-up on YouTube. It's usually not really that political in that sort of way. It usually he does tie in political elements, but not like this.
You didn't used to need to do that. Like you could watch something like, say, Benny Hill, or in Australia you could watch you know, the Crocodile Dundee dude. What's his name? Can't remember his name off the top of my head. And those shows were quite similar, you know. You know, it was chicks in underwear and like just funny working class jokes and this kind of stuff. And that was all right because it was just the culture, you know.
But it's like I have quite a soft spot for the Canadian Norm Macdonald. I often think that because people are quite harsh on the North American comedians generally, and but they have had some brilliant comics come out of there, you know. And it's like people would have this thing where they'd go like they complain about like during Gamergate, they go, we don't like the politics in the computer games. It's like no one actually has a problem with media, you know, computer games, movies, comedy, whatever, having a political narrative or a political angle to it. In fact, it usually enhances those things. But it's just it's so blatantly just this sort of particular sort of regime narrative. It's bland, it's boring, it's predictable. You know, you can turn on any new film on Netflix or TV show, and you can call things out as they're happening, because it's just painted by numbers, because the propaganda is so tight that there's really only so many ways you can take any given situation in a piece of media now.
Yeah, 100%. Look, I can't watch almost anything modern because there's always a girl boss. She can be 80 pounds wet and she'll beat up 250-pound blokes easily, chuck them over her shoulder and all this shit all the time. And we all know this is shit, because if it's not, then why are feminists, why did they push through these things where any sort of male violence to a woman ends up with a bloke being arrested, even if he's like a 5'6" wimp? That's always what happens, because, you know, 99% of blokes can beat up 99% of women, roughly. It's just the way things are. I'll give you an example. I watched a film which I like a lot called Sicario last week.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Yeah.
It's a like a Mexican drug cartel film. And the chick in that movie is perfectly all right, because although she shoots a bloke right at the beginning, fine, anyone can pull the trigger on a gun, all right? But she doesn't and can't beat up blokes.
Yeah,
like at least 2 or 3 times in the movie.
She gets quite badly manhandled in places in that film as well.
Yes,
like she's made out to be like quite vulnerable, and that's kind of like part of the motivations in it. But yeah.
And the guy in the end, the Mexican guy in the end, turns around and says, "Look, you got to fuck off because this isn't right for you," and that's entirely correct, of course. But look, that film was perfectly all right. had the female person was probably the star of the movie, I guess. But I got no problem with that. But she played it as a woman, not as like some made up girl boss bloke, which they're not, and they never are. Like I don't know about you, Atman, but like I've been in like pubs where there's been a big fight broken out, and women don't want to get involved in that shit, mate. Trust me, they don't. They want to hide behind you and leave. It's like, you know, it's that's women.
Yeah,
and good on them, because that's not their skill set.
Yeah, they're naturally quite averse to violence anyway.
I
remember when I was with
they don't have that killer instinct stuff that blokes have going on, you know.
Yeah, I mean when I was younger and I had a girlfriend when I was like a teenager, she there was a guy who was trying to start a fight on me from a different school in this park, and she was like hanging off of my arm trying to stop me from fighting him, and I wasn't gonna fight him anyway. I didn't want to, but I was going to try and defend myself if it came to that. And I had to sort of roughly grab her afterwards and say, like, never ever do that again, because you were just going to make things worse by trying to sort of drag me out of that. Because she was just gonna get in the way, and she was gonna stop me from being able to defend myself and her. It was kind of a crap. But they're so sort of violence averse that they will do that.
Oh, mate, look, I did not always. I was on Thursday Island, which, like, Thursday Island is a weird place. It's like there's, I don't know, 100 or so Australian white dudes who live there, and like, I don't know, probably a bit more than that, probably 200 Australian white dudes who live there, and who all work for the government, basically, one way or another. And 1,500 Torres Strait Islanders who are not like the Aboriginals at all. Totally different. They were headhunters back in the day and big seafarers. And like, you go in the museum there and like you'll get these knives with notches on them. And each notch is a head that this dude had taken. Quite fierce. And I remember like one dude got in trouble. He ran this chicken shop. And like the Torres Strait Islanders are getting fat because they eat too much fatty chicken and shit like this, which is not what they were, not what their DNA is designed to take. And this dude said something bad to some bloke in this like kind of fried chicken shop. And so all these Torres Strait Islanders, like about 12 of them, were trying to beat him up. And I'm trying to stop this dude getting beaten up. He's a white dude. And my chick wanted to go and stand in the middle of it. I had to pick her up, carry her down the road, and then go back. Because she didn't realize that these dudes would have just punched her. They wouldn't have cared. And good on her. She was a brave Aussie white girl. But, like, she needed moving because, like, she had too much mouth and not anything to back it up with. And I didn't even really want to get in a fight with these guys, because if I did, I'd have every Torres Strait Islander getting in a fight with me for the next however long I stayed there. So, that's kind of the way that thing works. Like, Australian sailors would pull in there in their little patrol ships. And if one of them said something that somebody else thought was a bit out of the way to a Torres Strait Islander girl, either like a chat-up line or whatever, they'd get the shit beaten out of them and end up in the hospital. And my chick who worked in the hospital used to end up treatment. Never anything on the news about it, of course, because you mustn't say anything about our brown friends. But, it's like, it's the world is not as simple as people think it is.
No.
But yeah, women can't get in fights, even like quite brave women like my girl, like, couldn't have fought some bloke 4 inches shorter than that. You know, she could have used her mouth quite well and probably would have slapped him, and she certainly threw things at me on occasion. But I used to just laugh and duck. So but women get away with this shit because blokes let them, basically.
Yeah, and it's like, It's yeah, and you do see that a lot in films now, and it's like it's all done under the guise of subverting expectations as well, and it's like they're not subverting shit anymore. It's everyone sees
No.
this stuff from a mile away. Even like quite regular people now will now say, oh, it's just going to be this, and they're just going to do that, and stuff like that.
Well,
There's
we've
a guy
just
at my
had. Sorry, carry on.
I was just going to say that, like, I've got a guy at work who's like one step away from owning a collection of Funko Pops, right? Like a proper cape shit enjoyer, and
Oh dear.
and even he turned around and said, "Oh, I'm not going to be watching the latest series of that or this film of that because it's just all the same at this point." It's like, yeah, it is. Took you 10 years to work that out, but.
It's just all the same shit. I'll look at a film, I'll watch it. I remember I watched this film about some English medieval king, and in the first 5 minutes there's a black English knight in it, and I just turned it off. I said, okay, it's like, because there were no black English knights, trust me. But yeah, the latest one they've done is Netflix just did a quick documentary on King Cleopatra, who famously had affairs with Julius Caesar and then Mark Antony. In fact, I think she married Mark Antony, to be fair. But anyway, King Cleopatra was one of the Ptolemies, and the Ptolemies were descended from, one of Alexander the Great's generals, a northern Greek and an aristocrat. And the Ptolemies did not have the tiniest little bit of even Egyptian blood in their veins, let alone black African, which is what Netflix was basically saying going on the chick they portrayed her as.
Yeah.
She was a northern Greek queen. She was a European. And didn't have any even Egyptian blood, let alone like people from Black Africa below the Sahara.
Well, the thing is, even Egypt of that time, I remember seeing something a while ago. They were admittedly talking about a slightly older Egypt than Cleopatra, and they were basically marveling at the fact that there was more people in England who shared a closer genetic tie to ancient Egyptians than modern Egyptians.
Yeah. And I mean, look, if you go and look at modern Egyptians, my old man served in Egypt for 2 years in the army. If you go and look at modern Egyptians, most of them are not black. They're Semitic, shall we say?
Yeah. Well, they're they're a product of like the Great Arab Migration.
And of course that happened long after Cleopatra.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty recent by historical standards.
Yeah, this was like hundreds of years after Cleopatra, and Cleopatra, as I say, she was a northern Greek queen. She could speak Egyptian because she was pretty intelligent, and it was a useful thing for her to do. But she had no Egyptian ancestry, and the idea that she had Black African ancestry was absolutely—it's just insane.
Yeah, they were literally doing the "We Was Kings" thing in the trailer, though, weren't they? Where they're like, "We don't care what they say in school. She was black."
Yeah, it's been heavily ratioed, I'm pleased to say, but I mean, a few history channels that I follow put stuff up to point out what crap it is, but
yeah,
it's just. We live in this world where they're just trying to pretend about, like 18th century or 19th century Britain had loads of black people in it, which it didn't.
Yeah, I had someone on Twitter actually the other day telling me that Britain's history is of like immigration and diversity, and I laughed at them, and they said, "Oh, you need to go read some history." It's like I don't. I mean, I guarantee that person probably doesn't genuinely own a book outside of Harry Potter.
Guaranteed.
It is. These people are cringe, and these are the people. I mean, these are just like shit libs, right? Street level shit libs, but they are they're like leeches, right? They latch on to the establishment, to our current elite, and they kind of draw power from that. And these are the people that we have to put up with as our betters, essentially, in society.
I gotta laugh at this one from Jobu. White guy playing Martin Luther King. The king is the identity final politics boss.
Yeah.
Except somehow I don't see a white guy playing Martin Luther King or King Shaka of the Zulus either. I just don't see that as being very likely. Or maybe a white guy. Oh, hang on, let me think. I was just going to say maybe a white guy playing Gandhi. I guess we've kind of had that.
Yeah, we have.
Kind of. Anyway. It's just so fucking stupid. John Best, that's pretty accurate, really. In all honesty, that's fairly accurate. It's maybe a little bit exaggerated, but not by much. Like all through from when I was a little kid and old enough to realise what the UK population was, which was when I was about 7, I guess, up until when I left school and then joined the British Army. British population varied from 54 to 56 million. And now, what are we at, 65 or some ridiculous amount like that?
What, the population?
Yeah, isn't it?
It's
63, 65 million?
70 million, I think.
Oh, for God's sake. And like I said, all the time from when I was 7 to when I was 18, it moved by 2 million.
Oh, it's 67 million. They're putting it down as. Oh, that was 2 years ago, though. So, yeah, probably 70 million.
Yeah. It's pathetic. It's just pathetic. And the vast majority, because we don't have replacement birth rates, almost all of that growth is mass immigration.
Yeah.
It's scary. In actual fact, it's scary.
Yeah, the population would only be sort of a hair above 50 million if that's the case.
Which would be absolutely fine for islands the size of Britain, and young couples would be able to buy houses at affordable rates, and wages would be not bad.
Living costs might be a bit higher, but I think people would take that if they could get on the housing ladder.
Well, yeah, and also if like wages would go up a bit, which they also would have to.
Of course, the thing is as well, the taxes are horrific, like absolutely horrific. And what exactly are you paying for? Just a load of shit.
Well, you're paying for all those hotels that the illegal immigrants have got to stay in for.
Yeah, and because they turned the pensions into a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, which you won't get a pension, Emma. No chance. No chance you'll get a pension whatsoever. You're paying in for something you're never going to get.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it's like in your part of the world, but I remember like the last time I was in London, which was in the early 2000s. There's beggars all over the place, and they're nearly always white blokes. Some of them military veterans who fought in Iraq and Afghanistan, because of course the people at the bottom of every housing list are single white men.
Yeah, even though like Canterbury now, you won't see a non-white homeless person in Canterbury, but this actually really fucked me off when I saw it. So do you remember Grace Blakely?
Mm-hmm.
She was like some Labour woman. She came to Canterbury and canvassed back in 2020, I believe, in November. I tried to have a look back because at the time she tweeted about it, and someone said about Canterbury being very like too white, and her and this person were having a bit of a joke about it. She's since deleted the tweet. I don't know when she deleted it, but I did look for it, and I found the actual tweet, but it just says it's deleted, so you can't actually like see it. But I know that's the tweet. And and this week there was a guy who tried to stop someone robbing a car in a multi-story car park, and he was stabbed. And you look at the names, and it's like Sabantu and something else. So so she got her wish in the end.
Typical Anglo-Celtic names, of course.
yeah. So she got her wish in the end. Canterbury isn't as white anymore, and it's not any better for it.
The only thing I remember about Canterbury Cathedral was my old man took me there when I was like 6 or 7 or something like that. And he showed us the Black Prince's tomb with his armor and stuff that's above it. Is that still there?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, because that was really cool. I loved that. It was like, shit, there was this English hero dude, and there's some of his armor. That was so cool.
But yeah, and it's like, and it's just the expense of the place, and a large amount of that is taxes. Lundberg says so many stealth taxes. I know the Taxpayers Alliance, maybe back in 2017, estimated that, I haven't looked into them since, but they estimated at the time that the tax burden on like the average sort of British person was sort of around 47% of like their total wages. And it's only got worse since then.
So that's including like VAT and all the rest of it.
Oh yeah, that's all forms of taxation. And you can't even talk to people about this. I argued with a Lib Dem councillor on my doorstep about this, a canvasser, and she was like, well, you must be earning X number to be taxed that much. I'm like, no, it's VAT. It's, the corporate tax that ends up trickling down, because of course a corporation can't pay tax. It ends up being split between the employees and the customers and all the various other taxes and it's all road tax, council tax, it all piles up.
And then you're going to get a 15-minute car tax sooner rather than later, according to everything I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And of course, all the green, in inverted commas, taxes that they're adding on. So, you've got to get rid of your carbon footprint.
I think Farage claimed that electricity has like a 25% tax rate on it, which is stealth taxes for green taxes. So yeah, there's that.
Lumber is saying in the chat 59p duty on fuel.
Yep.
Road tax, that's another one if you've got a car.
Yeah, I mean my road tax is over £500 a year.
Yeah, Lumbar again, 6% green levy on energy prices. And that's not even going into like the extra money people are paying for gas these days. I mean, I don't know what it's like in the UK, but like gas bills in Australia have just gone through the roof.
Yeah. And it's like we were talking about the NHS a while back. And there was the instance where I think there was some disagreements between certain people over this, but it's like you look at like the NHS. I'm not going to like rag on the NHS. I want to be quite moderate and say I want a single payer healthcare system, but the NHS, like the Tories, will not do anything about it, but they are right when they at least try to claim it's a managerial problem. That is true. It's not the only problem, and they kind of conveniently ignore the others, but there is a managerial problem there. I mean, one of the examples I like to bring up is this guy. I think his name was like Maruf Hussain. He was a councillor in Rotherham who sort of did his part.
That's an English name, Alan.
Yep. And he was a councillor in Rotherham, and he did his part to sort of put off reviews into the whole grooming gang situation. And then when this came out and he was sort of forced to step down, he sort of appeared just like a year or two later working as a head of a diversity and inclusion department in the NHS.
How amazing!
So it's like, these positions, these huge departments in this place are used entirely as a sort of like holding pen for disgruntled and shamed elites that need somewhere to go and can't actually be made unemployed because the regime needs to look after its own.
Yeah, they'll always give you a job doing something, even if you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
I had a job when I was like, just before I went in the army, I got a job via a quite flash job agency, which I came across by accident. And I worked for this organization called the Accident Officers Association, in inverted commas, overseas. And do you know what they were?
What?
They ran a cartel that basically kept insurance prices at the same rate all over what used to be the British Empire and what was then the Commonwealth. From I get cases shoved in front of me from Singapore or Malaysia or India or wherever, and all I was supposed to do was like tick certain boxes and pass them on, and it was the most boring job I'd ever done in my entire life, and it was completely pointless. Like I couldn't see what I was achieving there. And like I had this dude, like I smoke, and I smoked back then. And back then you could smoke inside. And this dude who sat opposite me, who'd been there for years, said to me, "You can't smoke those cigarettes. If you're gonna smoke cigarettes, you got to smoke French cigarettes. You got to smoke Gaulois." So I did, because I was like 17, and this dude was like, I don't know, 35 or whatever. And I sat there day after day, and the amount of work I did was like nothing, really. Like I'd sit there for hours doing nothing whatsoever, or going out and having a cigarette outside, because then I could have an English cigarette, or looking at some of these old files, because I could look at stuff going back to the 1920s, and it was just this organization which was running it was running something that kept the prices high for everything everywhere. That's all it was.
Yeah.
And this was in the city of London. It was the only time I've ever worked in the city of London.
Yeah.
It was just incredible to me. And like later on, I got jobs where I worked in warehouses and I was lugging stuff around, and like real jobs where you were working with quite nice blokes. The guys in this place were not all idiots. I mean, the guy who sat opposite me was, but I mean, most people weren't. But it was just a con job. It wasn't like a real job. I wasn't contributing anything to anything. You know what I mean? I wasn't even moving goods from a supplier to somewhere sold them, which at least I did when I worked in warehouses and stuff. It was like really fucking weird. Excuse my language, but I don't know, man. I just think the UK economy these days is just like all that sort of job where you're not really contributing anything to anyone. You're just like wasting time in an office space.
Yeah.
But what's our industry now?
Well, yeah, that's a question. I mean, we've got some manufacturing back, but it's just generally ridiculous. There's so much inefficiency in the economy, and there's so much general stagnation as well. And it's like funny enough, I was pointing out the other day, like there were so many hairdressers, right, that went out of business over lockdowns, and it wasn't because they like couldn't afford it, but it's just because they think running a business in the UK is so shit anyway, that when lockdowns came, they just said, yeah, no, that's it, I'm closing. And they just didn't want to bother reopening. And there's quite a few small businesses like that, and it's generally really quite sad and just pretty shitty. And it's like, you look at, like, I mean, to bring this back to the NHS, just as one example, not to rail on them or anything, but there's large parts of that just seem to be like a works program for foreign medical staff. You can sit in like the overnight waiting room, right, and they'll just have these foreign nurses that will just keep taking your blood pressure over and over and over again. They're not writing it down, and indeed you have to have your blood pressure taken again and written down and actually recorded when you go off anywhere.
Yeah, it's
You know,
bullshit.
and when you ask like another nurse about this, like, you know, an actual English nurse, they'll tell you it's just because those nurses are so low on experience and general knowledge. They just get them doing that to sort of as a form of training. But they
Yeah,
don't. But a lot of them are still there, like for you know, months or years.
yeah.
And,
My late Australian girl, the one I talked about earlier on Thursday, like she was a nurse with a master's degree in nursing, and she used to say exactly the same thing. Like Australia is full of overseas nurses who are actually not qualified to work in the Australian system, so
mm,
they get them to do these shit kicker jobs because they can't do anything else. And to some degree, it's also true of some overseas doctors as well. They're not
yeah,
qualified in our system, so they give them these shit jobs. And
yeah,
like this chick I'm talking about, like she had a master's degree. Her master's degree thesis was on how you treat women after they've had a miscarriage, which Australia came out with a thing called Pathways, which started off in America, of course, and then the Brits and the Australians copied, which was basically you must do this, then this, and this. And she was arguing, like, you know, women are different about what happens when they have a miscarriage, and maybe we should treat them as individuals rather than like everyone's the same. Which of course is the modern lefty way. Everyone's the same, you know.
mm,
So she wasn't a stupid woman. She was an intelligent, very intelligent woman. And she said exactly the same thing, Alan, that you know you get these third world nurses coming into Western medical systems, but they're not qualified up to the level that you expect them to be. So you
mm,
can't use them for like useful stuff. You have to use them for shit stuff.
yeah, yeah. And it's like as you go up to the more specialized departments where the nurses actually have to be good, the teams get whiter. um,
I'm 100%. Yeah, absolutely. Like, my chick was a theatre nurse, and she could do anesthesia and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, absolutely. You're 100% right.
Yeah, and it's like and Lumberg said in the chat, more R&D than production for more basic stuff, but production for prototypes and limited production runs. I mean, being that I do like customs and I do export, I do see a lot of cool stuff that is made in these sort of companies that you've never even heard of, these engineering firms, and you know they're exporting like, you know, like these limited run things for some train abroad or whatever. Yeah, and some of it's pretty cool. You know, there is still there, and there's a lot of talent sitting. Some of it being used, but quite a lot of it, I think, also sitting in the British economy that isn't being
A lot of
utilised as well as it
wasted
could be.
talent. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
um,
I think it's the same in Australia, probably in Canada, and even probably in New Zealand. There
yeah,
is a lot of people who are sitting there wasting their damn time who could actually do stuff that would like change the world for the better a bit anyway.
yeah, yeah. And it's like, you know, and there's still a bit of power in the old beast yet that is in some instances being used, but not enough. I'm always a little bit sad when I see that like the new Siemens trains that they're building. They're obviously all the parts are being imported in from Germany, and you know that's a bit of a shame because I've actually seen like a lot of these parts are made in the UK, but usually in much smaller numbers. um, so it's a bit of shame. It's a bit of a shame that we just aren't just making our own high speed, low energy trains. But
It's a bit adamant. It's a bit like the Type 26 frigate,
yeah,
which is the new Royal Navy City class frigate. I think the first one's going to be called HMS Belfast.
mm,
Um, and both Canada and Australia are buying versions of this ship, which they're going to build locally, obviously. But they're buying versions of this ship because it's going to be absolutely the best anti-submarine frigate in the world. Britain still has skills. It still has good people, but we're just not using them enough. And I'm also a bit concerned that the UK is building less of them than Australia is, for God's sake.
Yeah.
And Australia, I live in Australia. I love Australia. I love Australians, but it's a smaller economy than Britain is.
Yeah. I mean, like one of the industries that we have, which a lot of people don't even hear of, it's kind of small again, but it's one of these sort of low number, high quality things. Is like where I am, we do a lot of exports for this company that builds air conditioning units for mines. So
enough.
you know they're shipping all this stuff out to like Kazakhstan and places like that, which is pretty cool. You know, it's some pretty cool tech involved, and it's quite interesting to do, but yeah, and it's like, I mean, you even get this problem in America. Like I've told this story a bunch of times, but like I remember speaking to a guy who was doing tutorials on how to make computer games, like 2D computer games out for in Python, right, as in programming, and he was doing it to teach like people how to program. And you know what he didn't know about programming generally wasn't worth knowing. And yet he didn't work as a software engineer or a software developer. He did some really mundane job. I can't remember what it was now, and like some really crummy sort of like you know, sort of working class job essentially. And I just kind of remember sitting there thinking, you know, this is just such a waste that this guy's doing this rather than working for some actual tech company.
Yeah, totally agree. There is a huge amount of wasted talent in the modern West, particularly if you're a straight white man, because, you know, the only evil thing in the modern Western world is ye straight white men. It's the only thing you're not allowed to be. Everything else is absolutely fine. But straight white men, we're all evil, supposedly. Which, I don't know. I think it was straight white men who stopped slavery in the original case, but you know, it's just me.
Yeah. Anyway, I can't stay too much longer.
No worries, mate. All right. Adamant, did you have anything you wanted to plug, like your excellent Bowden Bomber channel?
I haven't had anything new to that, but when I do, I will push it then.
Can you stick your Bowden Bomber chat link into the comments, if you would, please?
Yeah, sure. Just give me a sec.
Guys, if you want to send us a super chat, you may do so, but you can do so via Entropy, which is pinned at the top of the chat. But you don't have to, so that's all
right. I've probably lost the chat now. Oh, there we go.
Adam's Bowden Bomber channel is worth a look, by the way. He's got some quite good stuff on there. You go. Go and check that out. I have something I want to plug. Sunday week, which is to say not tomorrow, but in a week's time, on, let me get this right.
It's Sunday, the 23rd.
30th of April, actually.
Oh.
Isn't it?
That would be not next Sunday, but the Sunday after.
Oh, actually, yeah, you're right. Thank you very much, Alma. 23rd of April, I will be doing a stream on this channel with the excellent and well-known Apostolic Majesty on Anglo-Soviet relations in World War II. So we're going to be looking at stuff like Churchill and Stalin, obviously, the Arctic convoys, which were some of the most deadly convoys of World War II, that the Royal Navy mainly were responsible for, and the British Merchant Navy. We'll also be looking at British lend-lease to the USSR, which was entirely at the expense of British forces in the Far East, like Singapore and Malaya, etc. We'll be looking at the RAF bombing German seas to appease Stalin, and the Stalin-Churchill percentages agreement and all that kind of stuff. So, like, everything basically related to the Anglo-Soviet relationship in World War II. I am not a huge fan of Winston Churchill, and as far as I understand, AM is not either. So I suspect that will be a good stream. Lumba says AM does. No, sorry, man, that's not true. Look, AM is a bit more pro-French than I am. In fact, he's a lot more pro-French than I am. But you know, I mean, I'm a traditional Englishman, so I'm not pro-French at all. AM is one of the best historians on YouTube, with no exceptions. I'm sorry. I would be happy to watch AM debate any historian I know on YouTube, and some of these guys are multi-published.
I will say that Apostolic Majesty does like to be thorough.
Oh, he does. Yeah, no, he absolutely does. But he's also very fair in that he will point out, for example, he's not a military or naval historian. Like he'll do grand strategy stuff, and politics and diplomacy, but he won't get into military stuff because that's not his deal. He doesn't like it. Whereas, on the other hand, I really love military and naval history. And the other stuff to me is slightly less interesting, although I hope I pay attention to it. And Winston is a bit of a bête noire to me. So I've done, I don't know, half a dozen streams at least with people like who am I thinking of here? I've done half a dozen streams at least. With
thinking of
Horus and what have you.
Yeah, on the Churchill and the interwar politics.
Yeah, Churchill, interwar politics, World War II politics. In fact, Horus has got one that will be coming out shortly, I think. On I can't remember what we did it on now, but I did one with Horus a while ago. He's going to be bringing out shortly. AM is, like I said, he's much more pro-French than me. But apart from that, I would say AM is one of the best historians on YouTube. It's very, very difficult to see anything he does on his channel which is not factually correct. And he has an absolutely amazing memory for dates, entries, and stuff that I sometimes struggle with. So yeah, I don't know. I'm a big admirer of AM. I think he has a great channel, and he's one of the only two channels I'm actually a Channy on. So there you go. So, the other one being Dave the Distribuist, who's also excellent, by the way. So yeah, there's that. Apart from that, I do want to do a Russia-Ukrainian war stream at some point, but like that's really depending on when Mitch wants to do it. I asked him last week and he hasn't got back to me yet. So when he gets back to me, I'll do a stream on that, I guess. Anything else you wanted to say?
No, I'm all good.
All right then. So I will play us out the tune, as I usually do. Lumba, no, he doesn't need editing. I just don't think this is true, mate. You I don't know. I don't know how many historians you've read, but like Apostolic Majesty's history streams are pretty much to the point. Honestly, what do you want to edit out? Some of the stuff you're not interested in? I don't know. But anyway, I'm going to play this out with you.
Song in praise of Jack the Sailor, sing a song about a jolly tar. Find what souls of those who gather close, right proud of them we are. Must we always sing of Tommy and King?
Duke, you still there?
Not one word for Jack. Know they have to pay the lively little lads in navy blue. Here's another country, British stars have met a many foes. How Jack fought in victories dearly bought, our history plainly shows. What we did in glorious days of Nelson, England still can do. Our souls still from a foreign yoke, the old
Okay, that was the Boys in Blue about the Royal Navy, which is by far the most important armed service to Britain, which is an island nation that depends on trade, and that is currently being totally neglected by the British government. The so-called, in inverted commas, conservative government under Rishi Sunak, the famous Indian dude who ain't Anglo-Catholic at all, but there we go. So yeah, and that was from Patriot Archive, which is a great channel. Please go and sub to it. So yeah, guys, I guess that's our stream for this week. Thank you very much, Alan, as always, for joining us. Would have been a crap stream without you, mate. So
Yeah, no problem.
nah, man, you're listen. You're one bloke, or I liked 6 years ago, and I still like. So you know, not true of all that many people, to be honest. But yeah. You're always the same, which I think is a good manly trait. So yeah, all right. Unless you have anything to add, I think we'll quit there.
No, yeah, I'm good.
All right, go and check out Bowden Bomber. That's a good channel. It's Adam's channel. And we'll see you next week. And also look out for the stream I'm going to be doing with Apostolic Majesty, who is one of the best historians on YouTube, for sure. Go on, guys.
Has it ended or? Oh.
I think it is. You